Good morning. How's it going? Oh, shoot. I forgot my thing.
What's up, guys? Happy Thursday morning, wherever you guys are. Hope you guys are well and well into your first cup of coffee, which by now most of you are probably at work or doing something much more productive than that. So that's awesome, too. But thank you for being here, guys. This is our Thursday morning talk show, Behind the Wheels, where we dive into uncomfortable topics.
Yeah, they are uncomfortable topics that nobody kind of wants to talk about. And because we're us, we're going to talk about them anyway, right?
I don't know if you caught it last week, but I almost shed a tear. You guys missed. I had to choke it back and change gears because I got a little emotional last week. So if you watched and you caught that, let me know in the comments. I'm curious to know if you caught that or if I hit it well or if my acting abilities have upped that much.
I caught that. His eyes are starting to well up, and I knew immediately when he needed to change gears.
I switched gears pretty quick.
You did. You were good.
I'm used to driving this bus, so switching gears is kind of my thing.
That's your thing.
Yeah.
But if you did not catch last week of Behind the Wheels, it was episode 1, and we shared our journey and our story as to how we got to where we are today. And it was intense.
It's a long journey. I mean, that's a lot of
almost 17 years.
Yeah, that's a lot of years. I had nearly, almost half my life for the most part. But yeah, it was cool. I'm glad we did it. I'm glad you guys. Thank you so much for those of you who did watch. Thank you to our moderators. I see Jed and Sandy in there this morning. Our loyals, our Bethunes, Darren's in the house. We appreciate you guys more than you know. Couldn't do it without you for sure.
Yeah, this episode today is grief is not one size fits all. We have lost a child, and our guest today that will be coming on, Brooke, she has lost a child as well. But some of you, raise your hand. Have you lost a pet? Have you lost a mom, a dad, a brother, a sister, a best friend? No one grief is more important than the other. And we really wanted to talk about different types of grief. In the movies, you see that it's all you're lying on the floor and woe is me, and you're just wailing at the top of your lungs. That's one type of grief. That's one way of expressing it. But there's other ways, like Kyle here is a silent grief kind of person and holds it in. And definitely,
that feels great, by the way. No,
it does not feel great to hold it in. Do not listen to his sarcasm this morning. Yeah, so I think that it's important to share in that. We will take questions at the end. We'll spend about 10 minutes doing questions. So get your questions ready. Go ahead and when I ask for questions, then go ahead and put them in there. But this is a safe space. And we want you to remember, people get vulnerable. Like, we're going to get vulnerable. Brooke is going to get very vulnerable. And we want you to be respectful.
Yeah, I mean, in the world of social media nowadays, there's really no filters for the most part. But yeah, I mean, like she said, if you got something negative to say or you want to cuss us out, go over into our short forms, because that's where everybody does it anyway, and you'll fit right in there. So we'd really appreciate it if that's what you do, or send me an email. Give me the business. Tell me anything you need to tell me, and call me whatever you want. That's great. But it's when we're trying to help people. It's really our sole purpose for doing this channel or this series we're doing. So really, I mean, we're just here to try to help. And if you don't like it, that's okay. I understand that. But just let's do it somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. So you guys know we've lost a child. Kyle's lost relatives. We've lost pets. And our guest today, Brooke Carlock, she has started the Grieving Mommy to help others on their grieving journey and to share. So right now I'm going to welcome her to the screen. Come on in, Brooke. How's it going?
Hey, guys. Brooke. It is going well. Sorry for the background here. I'm a teacher in a spare classroom.
Wait, this is like Siri's on for some reason.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri, I don't care. Stop. All right, try again, Brooke.
Oh, I was saying hi and sorry for my background. I'm a teacher, so I am in an empty classroom right now in the middle of my day to do this. So
well,
it's very institutional.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time out of your day to do this. I know being a teacher, every break you get, you're going to need. So yeah, thanks for spending a few minutes with us today.
And you're a middle school teacher.
Yeah,
so like you are a saint, an absolute saint.
I could not imagine.
So, Brooke, why don't you go ahead and start out by introducing who you are, where everybody can find you, and then kind of tell your story of how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I am Brooke Carlock. My website is called Grieving Mommy, and you can also find me on YouTube at Grieving Mommy and all the socials at Grieving Mommy as well. So just search Grieving Mommy and you'll find me somewhere. So my story is pretty depressing. I like to say, like, I don't know what I did in a past life to piss somebody off, but grief has touched my life kind of since I was little. I lost a grandfather I was really close to when I was 10, and his funeral was on my birthday. And I always say that was kind of like my first experience with real grief. And then I've just had kind of all sorts of traumatic things happen. So I lost my sister when I was 24 and she was 32. She died in her sleep of pneumonia, and it was totally random and unexpected. And then I lost a cousin and a sister-in-law through those years. And then I had a year-long stretch that was the worst time of my entire life. In October of 2021, I lost my dad unexpectedly. He seemed perfectly healthy. I had had dinner with him just a couple of days before, and I got a call in the middle of the night that he had died in his car on his way home from work and had a heart attack. So that was devastating. And I was doing all the planning for that, planned his funeral. And then the day of my dad's funeral, long story short, I got a call that my stepmom, who was having her own issues, had overdosed on the day of my dad's funeral, and then she died. So I lost my dad and my stepmom within 2 weeks of each other, and had to plan both of those funerals and take care of all of that. And then 3 months after that, I got the call that no parent ever wants to get, and found out that my 10-year-old daughter, Libby, had died in a car accident. So she was on her way to her dad's house. Her dad and I are divorced, and my oldest son, Max, who was 19 at the time, he had picked her up from dance class and was taking her there, and he missed a stop sign. He was actually having trouble with his car and had called my ex-husband and said, like, what do I do? My car, an engine light came on, and my ex-husband had told him to pull over in a parking lot that was coming up, and he was going to come and meet him and check out the car. And we think my son was just distracted and went through a stop sign. And it was a notoriously dangerous intersection with a lot of trucks. And Libby's side of the car was hit by one of those huge car carrier trucks. And we're told that she died instantly. My son was really injured. He had a bad head injury. I got that call, rushed there. I think what was the most traumatic for me is that they wouldn't let my ex-husband and I see her. They had a sheet over the car. And I understand that some of this, like, I'm sorry if this brings up things for you, because they wouldn't let us. Like, we tried to get to the car, because your instinct as a mom is to, like, run and save your baby, and they just held us back, and we're like, no, you don't want to see her. So they wouldn't let us, and we ended up going to the hospital to take care of my son. And so that was kind of how I ended up here. Oh, and along with that, then I found out that my mom has pancreatic cancer. So she's been battling pancreatic cancer. So it's just kind of one thing right after another. But Libby's death, honestly, it completely changed me as a person. And along with being a teacher, I've been a writer pretty much my whole life and written professionally. So writing was just the way that I just needed to get it out. And so I started a blog and started putting things out there and called it Grieving Mommy. And more people, like, I was amazed how many people were saying, like, thank you for talking about this. Like, because I looked around and it was really hard to find, like, raw, honest talk about grief, like the ugly side of it, the side that's not pretty and not like a Hallmark movie, So that's kind of what I've been doing. And then I started the YouTube channel just to kind of put a face to the blog and share those videos of what my journey has looked like. And I started I took a grief certification course with David Kessler, and yeah, so now I just sort of try to help as many people as I can.
Wow.
That's the only word that I can think of that best describes you is resilient.
Wow. Yeah.
Just going through so much. I am so sorry that you have had to walk the journey that you have. But I do want you to know, I fully believe wholeheartedly you help so many people by sharing in your grief, and it allows them to feel okay in theirs. We had actually just watched the Emotions movie, Inside Out. And, I think you got a real good look at emotions and how each one of them needs their own time. For years, I hid behind joy. I pretended that I was happy. Like I was like, okay, no, if I'm happy, the world is happy, everything's good. And that was so unhealthy, like such an unhealthy coping mechanism. So what are some of the things that you share on your YouTube videos? Like, can you tell us like what's helped you the most get through your grief?
One of the biggest things that I like to talk about is the idea of functioning, and how your functioning level doesn't necessarily represent your grief on the inside. I have always been, having gone through all of those losses, I just kind of learned to keep going, and learn that like all these crappy things keep happening, but I will survive. I just have to keep going. So I never, like after Libby died, I did all the things. I planned the funeral, I like planned everything in the funeral, and I wrote about it, and I was still doing things. And then I was afraid that people were going to be like, people kept saying like, you're so strong, you're so strong. And I'm like, well, I kind of have to be, because I have 2 other kids, which you guys understand as well. Like you don't really have a choice. If you're a parent, you can't just be like, I'm out, I'm in grief. You have to keep going. And I started to get really worried. Like, are people going to think I'm a terrible person, that I'm not like breaking down and sobbing all the time, and that I can get all these things accomplished? And so I started kind of researching that and talking about it a lot, that just because people I can come here and I can go to work and I can do my job, that does not mean that when I go home, I'm not crashing on my sofa for the rest of the night, unable to do anything. It's just that, I can go to a social function and I can smile. I can talk to you guys here and be smiling and fine and whatever, but then that will drain my energy for the rest of the day. And people don't see that on the inside. I'm like, So that's one of the biggest things that I like to get across, is just that you can't tell what people are going through looking on the outside. If you would look at you, you're put together, beautiful, like sassy and fun. And then, like you have all this stuff going on, as we learned last week, behind that, and a long journey to get there. And I think that talking about that and normalizing it is the most important thing that I'm doing.
Yeah. That's an amazing point, especially for someone like me who, 5 years ago, or even 3 years ago, whenever something bad would happen to me, I would just shut down. I'd crash into bed, lay there and just wallow in it, and I didn't have the strength, or didn't have the know-how to get up and live a day-to-day life, and I would say that's something that you brought that up, made me click. Yeah, that's something I worked on. But yeah, that's amazing that you're able to do that, and that's unbelievable. Like, I'm a little floored right now. Like, that's a lot. Like, you've gone through a lot. You definitely need some good vibes coming your way. You guys should have some good stuff coming down the pipeline for sure. I would hope.
I think for me, one thing to help me through it of the loss is that it was meant to happen to me, to make me who I am today. And that's the realization that I had to come through meditation and kind of working on myself, is that I had to lose Ethan in order to help other people. And I've been called callous for saying that, and just like, emotionless. But I think you have to get to that point of letting go in order to live again. Because just like Libby wouldn't want you being stagnant, just like Ethan wouldn't want us being stagnant and just wallowing in it. You know, I think you take your pain that you've experienced and you help people with it, and you help a tremendous amount of people.
That's incredible.
Thank you. I can so relate to what you're saying, because, you know, you talked in the beginning about being a safe space and the nasty comments, and go to those short videos. I don't know what it is about them, but that is where people like to blast you so much. But oh my gosh, like I have had moments where I've had people say horrible things. Like I'm doing this to help people. I make no money from this at all. You know, it's I spend more money than I make, and to have people say like, you're just trying to get famous off your daughter's death, and you know, like, why are you talking about this? You're just bringing people down. And it's like, oh my gosh, are people like, you're using your daughter to, you know, be on YouTube? I'm like, no. Okay, well, first of all, my daughter loved YouTube and loved Instagram. She loved social media. She was always doing the videos and like the dances and that kind of stuff. So I know that she would be sitting like right here next to me on camera, like, you know, sassing it up for everyone. Yeah. And it's coming from a place of helping people. And I think you're exactly right. And I explain it to people when they say like, well, how can you do that? And how can you talk about your daughter? Like I look at it like, she gave me this gift. She gave me the gift of being able, because I love the writing. And now I have something that I am so passionate about, that I have something that I can put out there. And she gave me the gift of being able to do something that I love. And is it in the shittiest of ways? Absolutely. But what else are you know, I could be staying in bed all the time, not doing anything. And that's not helping anyone. And she was awesome and helped as many people as she could. So I just want to do the same.
I love that. And I think something that's important for me that I've learned, because people would say, oh, losing a child, that's the worst grief. That's the worst grief. Yes, it effing sucks and it blows and it's terrible. But, you know, we have friends who have lost their cat of many, many years. And that cat was their absolute best friend. They share their most intimate secrets with that cat. And I think it's important to recognize that that's grief too. Losing your best friend, losing your spouse, your partner, losing your mom, your dad, all of those are just as much grief as losing a child.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I think that's very important, you know, because we do see that a lot, you know, and what she said makes total sense. I mean, it looks different for everybody, you know, not everybody, you know, had a child, or not everybody had, you know, a mom and dad in their life. So whatever it is that they put their love and energy to, you know, that's still a detrimental thing to someone. You know, I can totally see that.
So, Brooke, what are some ways, what are some different ways of grief that you've seen? You know, talk about maybe like, you know, there's silent grief and there's outburst of grief. What are some ways that, so people feel normal that they may have that type of grief?
Well, I would say I like to talk a lot about tears in particular, and how there are so many different types of tears. You know, I have the, you know, just the slow down your face kind of tears when I'm thinking of a painful memory. And then you have the, you know, complete sobbing, broken down tears where, I mean, I had times where I cried so hard I broke a blood vessel in my nose, and there was like blood gushing everywhere, and it looked like something out of a horror movie. And you know, that came from my grief. And then you have like the happy tears, and then you have the numbness when you can't cry any tears at all. And I think that kind of goes along with your one size doesn't fit all idea, where, you know, even people who are grieving just one person or one pet, you can have so many reactions, you know, over a short span of time, long span of time. And it doesn't really matter who or what it is that you lost. It's just how much you loved that person, and all of that love just figuring out, you know, how to deal with it still being there without that other part of you being there.
Right.
So yeah, kind of the tier idea. And I mean, there's lots of different types of grief. I've had like, the compound grief where I just have grief after grief after grief, like loss after loss. There's a ton of different kinds. So I don't know if I really want to get into all the different kinds, but yeah, it really doesn't matter what it is.
It's still grief.
Yeah, definitely.
Someone had brought up a good point in the comments. Grief of not necessarily death related, but the ending of a friendship, or like in my case, my parents really disowned me 17, 18 years ago. And so grieving the fact that my parents are still alive, but I don't have them anymore, So I think it's important to talk about the grief of losing something. Like if you lose your home to foreclosure and you're on the street, the grief of that. So there's so many different forms of grief and how to process them.
For sure. Yeah, I think like she said, she made a good point that grief is based off of love, your love for whatever that was, whether it be a human being, a pet, an animal, a friend, whatever, that's a good point. That's a good way to phrase it. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as your attachment to it and your love for it, and losing that in whatever way. Yeah, I mean, I definitely can. That makes a lot of sense.
So as a man, how do you feel that men handle grief, and how could they handle it better?
Well, I think, I mean, I can really only speak for myself, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of a manly thing. We bottle things up. We bottle them, we put them away, and we try to forget about it. We may, I've always, before, and I still to this day, I'll pride myself in saying, I don't know if I'd call it, but I'd say I'm able to block out some negative, bad stuff. I'm able to kind of put it to the side and not touch it. But what we don't realize is that at some point in your life, that's going to affect you in certain ways that you may not even understand. And that's kind of where I am now, and what I'm still going through, and I've been going through the last couple of years of digging up some of these old things that I never dealt with and never processed. So, I think bottling it up is just not the right way. I mean, I think as men, especially American men, where masculinity is tied to so many things, and we feel like, okay, we can't show emotion, we can't cry, we can't do any of these things because we're men, and I think that really, because you're only hurting yourself, and I it comes in forms for me, anxiety and depression, and I'm sure other people would attack some in different ways. So I think bottling it up and just tucking it away is just not the right way to do it, and I'm still learning. I still do that a lot. With the accident with Ethan, that's what I did. It looked like I got over it relatively quick, which I didn't have the experience that Jen had. I was in a much different situation, but I just kind of, I felt it for a minute and I packed it away. I was like, I don't like this shit. And I packed it away and it was gone. Until many years later, till it started really hitting me and like, okay, now what's going on? So I think we tend to put things in a box and kind of tuck them in the back of the storage unit and shut the door on them. But I don't know. That's not the healthy way to do it, I don't think.
What's one way recently? Like, what's something that you've been doing recently to help you with your grief?
Talking about it, finding that safe space or that safe person to talk about it with, whether that's a therapist, a friend, a partner, whatever, I think that's super important, because when you get it out of your system and you talk about it, you're recognizing what it was and what it is, and you're able to kind of start processing it and labeling it. That's a big one I've learned. A term I learned in this mental health journey is labeling. I'd never heard that before beyond anything other than like retailing. But labeling your thoughts and your emotions and your feelings, that way, when it comes in your head, okay, you kind of can recognize what it is. So I think for me, that's been an important part of getting me to where I am right now.
Yeah, he's done beautifully. Something for me, and then I'll have Brooke give some suggestions, is I do a lot of meditation. I think you've got to sit with yourself and ask yourself the hard questions. And when you say the word, time to change classes.
What it is, yeah.
When you say the word meditation, people get like, ooh, I don't know how to meditate. But my definition of meditating is simply sitting with yourself, whether that be going on a walk, sitting by a lake, doing something like coloring, and just being in your own mind where you're distracted enough to ask yourself tough questions. And that's what I had to do. That's what the last like 3 years of my mental health journey has become, is finding my inner voice and what I believe, and without the societal pressures around it. And I think once you stand firm in what you believe, you give yourself the answers that you're looking for. You're able to stay rooted and stay grounded and be able to grow through things, as opposed to let them swallow you.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So, Brooke, what are some ways people can help to grow through their grief?
Well, one, just kind of piggybacking off of Kyle, my ex-husband, David, who is Libby's dad, I have some interviews with him on my YouTube channel. And what you were saying, Kyle, really resonated. He's kind of the opposite. He is very emotional. He has no problems crying. And a lot of times he says, you know, specifically to the men out there, like you need to talk to someone, you need to get it out. Because it is not healthy. And my brother, on the other hand, he pushes everything down like your instinct is. And I think like a lot of men have that instinct to kind of push it away, don't think about it. And I know I was more guilty of that actually than he was, where I just kept going, trying to distract myself and not to think about it. And something that I found that was very helpful for me was learning to compartmentalize my grieving time. So Kyle, this might be something that could be helpful for you, where I know, you know, I get through my work day, I'm fine, or, you know, get through whatever I need to do. But then I actually have specific times where I set aside time to actually grieve and feel those emotions. Okay. So I will like literally schedule, I'll be like, okay, Saturday afternoon, I don't have anything going on. I am going to open the door to my daughter's room and I know I'm going to cry. I'll just go, you know, look around and sit in there and cry and feel that. Or I will, you know, watch old videos of her or look at pictures or things like that. And so I'm still processing those emotions, but I'm still functioning when I need to function. And I think a lot of times that's kind of what people struggle with. They struggle with the idea of, you know, how do I go back to work? I'm going to be a giant mess. You know, how am I going to make it through? And I think if you allow yourself, instead of just trying to push it all down, push it away and kind of, you know, ignore it or work through it, actually giving yourself that specific time to process can be really helpful. Something else that I think is amazing for people, you said the talking to people. Talking to people is my number one recommendation. Just getting it out. Whether that is with a friend or a family member or someone professional like a grief coach or a counselor, just verbalizing things is so therapeutic. I mean, you don't even have to be saying anything groundbreaking, but just telling the story of what happened over and over again can be amazingly helpful because it makes it sink in. And you'll see, like, as you tell the story over time, your feelings sort of, your emotions start to change with it until eventually it sinks in that it happened. And that's usually the terrible part. But then after a while, you know, you can start to talk with more positivity and less painful memories and more joyful memories. So I think that is extremely helpful. But yeah, the talking and then creating some sort of meaning with the person or the pet that you lost. So doing something to honor that person. So like myself, my ex-husband and I created an organization called Live Like Libby. She was a competitive dancer. Her life was dance. She lived in her dance studio. So Live Like Libby raises money for dancers who are in financial need. And we've been able to give scholarships to, you know, dancers who wouldn't have been able to afford to do the competitions and take the classes. And it gives her death a purpose. Like nothing there. and I kind of hate saying that because it's like there is no purpose for her to, you know what I mean? Like if I could change it in a heartbeat, I would. If I could never write another sentence about losing a child, I would, but it happened and I have to accept that it happened. But then making some sort of good out of it is so powerful for people, I think.
It's cathartic almost, you know,
Yes.
you really like every September we have Pay It Forward for Ethan. And we've been doing that for like 7 years. And the reason why we started it was because September just effing sucked for us. Like it was terrible. I hated it every time. Like, you know, the Green Day song, Wake Me Up When September
Yes.
Ends. That was my anthem. And then I got this idea. What if we started a campaign on social media that is Pay It Forward for Ethan? Because Ethan loved to do pay it forwards. Like he would just randomly give people things because it made him happy. It filled his cup. And what I noticed was we started this and we would pay for the person behind us, or, you know, we would encourage people to do one random act of kindness without accolades a day for every day in September. And it made people so much happier. Like they just were like, I'm so glad I did that. I blessed somebody else. And when you give, you're really receiving, like you're receiving so much joy of helping somebody else. And so totally making their death into a purpose, I feel that. Because you need to turn it into a positive or else it's just going to swallow you whole.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
So, do you have anything else that you want to add, or should we take some questions, Brooke?
No, you can go ahead and I'll take any questions that anyone wants to ask if they have any.
If you have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat now. I am watching.
No. That's, you know, that's, I like that the, you know, setting time to sit in that, you know, sit in that emotion. That's good stuff, you know, and I'm not there yet. I'm still not there on my journey, but I see Jen do it a lot. Like I see her, she found a camera a while back. We weren't around long, but we bought one. So basically it was a pickup. It was basically before cell phones had video cameras. That's what this thing was for. And then cell phones kind of wiped it off the point. Anyway, she found it and it stores the media on the camera. So she found it and plugged it in and watched, and it had Ethan apparently had grabbed this thing. I bought it for her, but apparently Ethan had grabbed it and filmed like 2 or 3 hours worth of just
different days
of just random vlogging, apparently before vlogging was really even a thing. And she watched every second of that video and just sat there in it for 2 or 3 hours. So that's good stuff. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And that, you know, hopefully I'll get there at some point, you know, but there are those places I can go, and I avoid them still at this point, like the graveyard. Still to this day, I can't go there without just falling apart. It's just not possible for me.
I drive around the accident site almost all the time. I avoid it, but then I do set aside specific days to go there. Right. And people made like a memorial, you know, there. So I'll set aside a day to go, and I know that I'm doing it that day. So it's not like for some reason, if I would drive by it by accident or be in the car with someone and drive by, like that would upset me and be a huge trigger. But if I know that I'm going there with the purpose
right
of, you know, sitting with that grief, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Wanderlust has a question. How do you deal with grief when you mentally don't feel like you can?
I would say start small with things that aren't necessarily grief related. So maybe look at things like tiny little goals with, if you're not exercising, maybe start walking, like look at your physical health, things like that. Look at your self-care to just kind of try to get yourself in a better place, which then I think will help make you more able to mentally deal with the things that are tough. And I mean, if you feel like you can't at the moment, then that's okay. If it's been a really long time and you still feel like you can't deal with your grief at all, then that's probably the time that it would be good to try to find someone professional to talk to, I would say.
Well, it's like the airplane mask, you know, you can't help anybody else until you help yourself first. Yeah. And that's how we view our marriage. the kids aren't right if we aren't right, and our marriage isn't right if we aren't individually right. So we've got to make sure we're right individually. And I fully agree with all of that,
Yeah.
Brooke. You know, you've got to start on yourself and small little self-care things just to get you in the right space to be able to start to work on that. We've got another question. Sterling says, Brooke, my grandpa died in my grandma's / my arms after trying to save him after his dialysis tube went missing from him. With his blood on our hands and the shutdown 4 years later, I processed it, but I don't think fully. Oh, follow up. I don't think I fully processed it because I keep having flashbacks a lot. So do you have any advice?
Totally normal. And Jen, I'm sure you understand, like with Libby's accident, because they wouldn't let me see her, but I did see the car and what it looked like, and I know what happened. That's where I know you have the PTSD too. Like I have that in that my mind wants to create the scene of what happened because I wasn't there. And I really struggle with, especially driving in the car. That seems to be a place where I get a lot of those images and the flashbacks. The best thing that I found to deal with my flashbacks is that when I start having them, it might sound cheesy, but I do box breathing, which is where you take the deep breaths and you visualize the box. So it's like you breathe in for 4 and then hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4. And it sounds kind of silly, but the act of specifically picturing the box in my mind, or if you have anything that's like a rectangle or square in front of you, you can actually just look at those things while you're breathing, and it kind of helps for that immediate like redirect of your mind. So I found that really helpful when those flashbacks kick in. That is something, if it's really, really bad, they have EDMR therapy, it's called. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's almost like retraining, that when your brain starts to go to whatever that incident is, it's like a professional that teaches you to retrain those thoughts. So when that thought starts occurring, it actually changes to a different thought. I'm not trained in that, so I can't really speak to like how they do it. I just know that's something that I've learned, that if there's like trauma, or I would say in that situation where you're picturing like the blood on your hands and things like that, that might be worth looking into that EDMR to see if it can kind of stop those thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I had that a lot after the accident. I mean, I still have it a little bit to this day. But something I did, like I said last week, is I will take a positive memory of Ethan. When I see him in that state, I will take a positive memory and push that one out, push the negative one out and replace it with a positive. I will focus on that smile and that love and all the times that we were at Disney. You know, it helped to kind of hone in on one memory in the beginning. That way, that memory became so strong that memory would overtake that negative one, because the positive always overcomes the bad, I think. And so that's how I started in the beginning, was just picking one solid memory of just pure love that I had with Ethan. And every time that popped in, I was like, nope, you're not here. This is here. This is what matters.
Yeah, and just a couple things. Yeah, what she said about the breathing. I'm as a man coming into the mental health space in the last couple years, breathing cannot be practiced enough. Like it is. Yeah, it cannot be practiced enough. Like it is serious business. I'm a trained scuba diver, and we talk a lot about the breath just to keep yourself alive underwater, but we don't talk about it a lot when you're on the surface, about how much power it truly has. And another thing is, like the Jen was saying, this stuff takes practice. Like this stuff takes time. You don't just do it the first time and it's a one-time fix. Like you've got to practice this stuff. You've got to make it a routine, a part of your life. Like Brooke said, you've got to set time aside to do this, because you're not going to get it the first time. I mean, you know, it's going to take some time, but don't give up on it. You know, there's a lot of power in what these ladies are saying, you know, and I've seen it firsthand work. So just be patient with it, and, you know, and what do you have to lose? You know, I guess that's the big thing.
I also would like to say, I think there's a lot of power in what you're saying, buddy. Like, take a little bit of credit. Like, you're a man up here talking about grief and sharing. Like, there's a lot of power in that. Ashley Leith, one of our moderators, says, I don't necessarily have questions for Brooke. I can just relate to her a lot with all the loss and death. And I want her to know that she isn't alone and that our community loves her, Libby, and family. Absolutely. We become family here. And that's kind of what we've grown to do in our community, is to make our community family. Wanderlust, and then I'll get to Burning Queen. Wanderlust says, do you believe time heals?
I was going to say yes and no. I think if you lose someone or something that is that close to you, that was so ingrained in your life, I don't think time could ever take away their place in your heart. But I think that the pain can lessen if you learn how to deal with it over time. I don't think time heals. I think time softens. You know, I think time softens that hardness, and you're able to explore it and to dive into it at the time that's right for you, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think time will definitely can help and heal, but only if you pull it out and do the work to get it, to learn how to process it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Because if you're like me and you take it and you bury it deep in this pit that you can't even see anymore, 10 years go by and now all of a sudden it's showing its face again, then it's not going to heal. So if you pull it out and you work on it and you do these steps and you do these things they're talking about, I definitely think it'll help, but you got to pull it out and you're like
our psychologist in the house. That is awesome.
He's come so far. I'm so proud of him.
I did stay in a Holiday Inn last night.
That's exactly right. If you shut it down and you don't process, time won't heal it because it's still there and you haven't dealt with it. But if you deal with it, time can soften. Exactly what you guys said.
Burning Queen says, for K&J, thoughts on teens grieving. My 15-year-old son lost many relatives. His first pet, his neighborhood friends moved, and bullied by his teacher, to name a few. He has done EMDR, and therapy.
Wow, that's tough.
That's hard.
Yeah, that's some tough years to begin with, you know.
Those are really formative years. I would say, just as a parent, just being there, you know, and trying to find ways that they can find joy, so that way they can get to that place of working on. So if they enjoy like going to the park and taking a walk, whenever they ask for it, they look like they need, hey, do you want to go take a walk? Maybe you want to go out to lunch with me today? Just be present with them. You don't have to preach. You don't have to talk. I feel like you just have to be present and just love. And because I think the teenage years are so hard as it is. Brooke, do you have any suggestions for that?
I would say, as far, because I have two teen boys. So Max, who was driving the car when Libby died, that was a whole other beast, because he has that added guilt of that. He went to an amazing trauma therapist like immediately, and thankfully, I don't know how the brain works, but somehow he does not remember anything about the accident, which is like, I'm so glad for that. And I hope that doesn't come back, but it doesn't look like it's going to at this point. He is, I would say, kind of let them grieve in their own way. If you said your son was in therapy and EMDR, so I would say he probably knows the tools, but a lot of times teens don't show that they're using them as much, and their tools are a little bit different than what we would use as adults. So like my 20-year-old now, he is much better about expressing his emotions, and he doesn't do it a lot, but every now and then he'll kind of throw out these nuggets that show us that he is processing, and he is thinking about it. And my 17-year-old is kind of like a whole different beast because he is a shover. Like he will shove it into his toes and not talk about it. And it's difficult with him, but from working with his therapist and my therapist, I just sort of learned that it's better to just kind of let him do his own thing, and things, like I said, that I wouldn't think would be therapeutic. Like after Libby died, he'd go hang out with his friends, and I'm like, how are you going out with, like, why do you want to go have fun with your friends? You know, your sister just died. It's like, that's how he was dealing it. Like that was his comfort, his way of doing things, you know, to process. And I did find out he was talking to his friends and his girlfriend about it. He just didn't feel comfortable talking to me because he didn't want to upset me more. You know, he was worried about that. So let them know that they can talk to you whenever they need to, and that you're there and you're available and you're open, but don't be surprised if they're kind of dealing with it in a different way that doesn't really seem like they're dealing with it. They probably are. But yeah, teens are like a whole different beast.
For sure.
That is amazing advice. But I know Brooke has got to get back to her teaching. And so I want to kind of wrap up with final thoughts on grief. You know, I still stand by for mine that it's one size fits all. There's no time limit. There's no like, I can give you an end date of when your grief is going to soften. It's like Kyle said, you've got to do the work to heal it. It can be healed. I've been on this grief journey of losing Ethan for over 11 years now. And it's evolved as the years have went on. So grief is different for everyone, and don't feel bad if your grief is losing a pet or your grief is losing your home. Grief is grief, and it's a very tough emotion to get through. So you're doing the best you can with what you have, and just keep moving forward. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, just to piggyback off what she said, yeah, I mean, you got to talk about it. You know, you got to bring it out. You got to find that safe space to bring it out in. But like she said, there's no time limit. There's no rule book on any of this stuff. You know, you kind of gotta, each person handles things differently. I handle things totally different than Jen does. We clash all the time in this world and this subject. But yeah, I mean, my main thing is thank you to Brooke for coming on. That's some good stuff. Like, definitely go give her a follow and support. I mean, that's the people we need to be supporting. Like, they have a message and they're trying to help people, you know, so by all means, I can applaud her and everything she's doing. It's good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brooke, what are your final thoughts
on thank you so much for having me. I love your community, and that's what I'm hoping eventually to build with Grieving Mommy. So you guys are very inspirational, and actually both of you, just watching you and seeing you, it was actually one of my subscribers that said to me, hey, you should collaborate with Jen and Kyle. And I'm being honest, I had never heard of you. I wasn't planning on living in a bus or anything. So I didn't know who you were. And then I just started watching you guys and absolutely fell in love. But I mostly love the idea that you seem so happy. Like your life has gone on. You offer people hope. And that's kind of the same thing that I want to do, is that if you are suffering from grief, there is hope. There are so many places on the internet where, you go on Facebook groups and it's, 30 years later and people are still struggling to get out of bed, and, their lives are terrible because they lost someone, but it doesn't have to be that way. You can find a purpose from your pain. So I think that's so important to remember. So thank you guys for inspiring people in that way.
Absolutely. And if you would like to check more about Brooke, all of her details are in the description. I put them in there.
Look at you go.
Links to Instagram and to her YouTube. She has some amazing videos, wonderful posts on YouTube. I want to thank our moderators. Without you guys, you keep our chat nice and clean. We love you so much. I want to thank our Bethoonies. Without you guys, you're our ride or die people, and you're there for us. Some of you since the absolute beginning of Red, White, and Bethune. And so thank you, Bethoonies, from the bottom of our heart. We love you. And then to you, those of you watching, we wouldn't be here without you.
Yeah, that's why we're here. We appreciate you more than you know.
Yep. So thank you. Join us next week. Topic to be announced. Same time, same couch, and different expert. So we'll see you next week on Behind the Wheels.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye,
Thanks a
guys.
lot.
Thank you.